to stay.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Boards, a podcast dedicated to the actions and interests of skaters beyond skateboarding. My guest today, Ben McQueen, is originally from Indiana, where he grew up and started skating. For the last few years, Ben has been living in San Francisco, where he works as a tattoo artist. He just released a book called Let It Kill You, focused on the many links between skateboarding and tattooing. For this project, Ben went and interviewed legendary people from both worlds, such as Dressen, Cheyenne Sawyer, Bledsoe, or Nathan Costeco, to name a few. This is just volume 1 of a book series, and I look very much forward to seeing who Ben interviews next. So here's my conversation with Ben McQueen. I hope you'll enjoy it.
The rapture never ends.
Oh yeah, thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. I just finished reading the book today.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it's fresh in my mind, so that's really amazing. So yeah, first of all, congrats on that book. That was really interesting and beautiful looking, like the pictures, the everything. It was really well made. Even though unfortunately I didn't get the physical book. I read it on the PDF, but it was already pretty sick. So I'll definitely order one at some point. And and I'm really looking forward to the next ones. But before we get into all that, I usually start my interviews with just the guests introducing themselves and telling me how they found, skateboarding. And so, I know that you grew up in Indiana, right? Is that where you started skating?
Yeah, definitely. Grew up in the suburbs of Indianapolis, on the west side of Indianapolis. Started skating. It's always a little fuzzy. I think I was either 11 or 12, I would guess, just by it was probably going into 6th grade. I found a skateboard through a friend and sort of was pretty enamored by it pretty quickly. And I sort of realized up until that point I had been really into basketball and I wasn't getting any taller and I wasn't growing anymore. And I realized I probably wasn't going to make the team as I got older, and it sort of sucked a little bit of the fun out of that for me. So I think I was already looking for something else to sort of dive into when I found skating, and it worked out perfectly, man, yeah.
And what was like the kind of pivotal moment? Did you see someone skate? Did your brother skate? Like what was kind of your introduction to it?
No, honestly, it was mostly peers of mine at school. I think when you come out of elementary school into junior high, you're sort of like, there's multiple schools that are lumped together. So there were kids that I had never met. Up until that point, I had only been around the kids that went to the same elementary school that I did. So when I got to junior high, there were all these other kids that were into other things, and I sort of started seeing skateboarders in the school. But, to be honest, when I got into skateboarding, I hadn't even seen any videos or, magazines or anything at that point. It just felt pretty interesting. I guess I just got into it sheerly for that reason alone. And then, of course, as I got into it and the more I started skating, the more those things sort of presented themselves to me. So it just became cooler and cooler. I just kept finding new videos, new magazines, learning new tricks, meeting new people. So it was just continuing to unravel for me in a really exciting way.
Yeah. And so, were you ever sponsored, or did you ever aspire to get sponsored, maybe turn pro one day? I'm sure you dreamt about it like every skater, but was that ever kind of something you considered seriously, or did it always just remain a fun hobby?
Yeah, totally. Else? I mean, when you're a kid, I think you just want to go. I don't think any kid gets into sports without daydreaming about playing in the NFL or the NBA or, playing at some professional level or something. So, of course, that was always fun to consider. It wasn't until I got older that skating sort of started becoming frustrating, when you can't land a trick or your friends are improving at a more rapid pace than you are or something, that it can become a little more competitive in that way, I suppose. But I started skating and working at a skate shop, about 20 minutes from my house just outside of Indianapolis. And, we all sort of rode for that shop in the way of the kids that worked there got, we kind of were pretty young to be working in a skate shop. So we were sort of just getting free product to work in lieu of paychecks, so thinking back on it is probably super illegal, but we were stoked, work all day, get some free t-shirts, get a new board, get some new shoes, whatever.
Yeah.
And in that way we all started filming for videos, for the shop. And just, I think I was one of the first people to get a camera in my age group. I had another friend who had a VX, and we started just going out on these missions and filming and driving further and further outside of our cities to try to find new spots, and the Midwest is kind of cool. In Indianapolis, you're just a few hours from Chicago. You're a couple hours from Cincinnati, Louisville. So you're sort of in this area where if you just drive a few hours in either direction, you can find a whole new city to explore, So we were definitely trying to take advantage of that. And then, of course, just filming for, local shop videos and things like that. I did do a lot of filming, which I ended up sort of enjoying more than jumping down stuff at one point or another, So,
Okay.
but yeah, it was great, man. I mean, skating just kept, giving back in so many ways and continues to do so. You just, as soon as you feel comfortable, some new video comes out that raises the bar, you find something else or some new skaters, meet some kids at the park. It's great, man. Never ends,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And so tell me about tattoos. How did that interest begin? When did you start getting interested in those? And when did you get your first tattoo? I read, I don't know if it was in your book or in an interview, but you said that you got the Trail board logo, right? Was that your very first tattoo?
Yeah, so as soon as I turned 18, I had pretty much made my mind up that I wanted to be tattooed. I think it just sort of fell under the umbrella of rebellious things that you can do when you reach a certain age or something. So I didn't smoke cigarettes or do anything like that, so I wasn't going to go buy a pack of cigarettes, but I did go get tattooed, and I went straight to the shop. I think I did go to school that day. I was in my final year of high school, left school and drove straight to the tattoo shop that I knew of, and sort of walked in and didn't really... I guess it weirdly didn't dawn on me that I should have an idea going in there. The Trail board was a very impulsive thing. The guy asked me what I wanted, and I was like, I don't know, I guess I thought maybe I would figure it out as I got here, when I got here. So I went back into my car to get my ID, and I had all my school stuff with me, and I had a Trail sticker on one of my folders or my, whatever, agenda or something, and brought that in, and I was like, let's just do this, because I think even though I knew nothing about tattooing or being tattooed, I knew that it felt like getting something that was going to have a long-standing impact or was pretty timeless as far as, and up until that point, skateboarding was the only thing that I had found in my life that was really, had stuck with me for so long. So it made sense, I wasn't bummed on the tattoo or anything, but, so I got that. I think I paid $50 or something, and then I just hobbled out of the shop and, didn't know how to take care of it or do anything at all. Went straight to the skate park, showed everybody. It was fun, man. And then I think it's something about that moment of getting that first tattoo, I knew pretty quickly that it was something that I wanted to try to continue doing. There was some familiarity with the tattoo shop and the skate shop.
Yeah.
They had such similar atmospheres, the music that was playing, the people that were in there hanging out. Sometimes I think you feel a certain amount of judgment maybe as a skateboarder, going to certain places or being around certain groups of people, and it was just very similar to that, where I didn't feel like I needed to fake it at all. I could just sort of be myself, which was great,
Yeah. So you got that first tattoo, and then tell me about maybe between that first tattoo and when you started considering doing it professionally. I'm sure there was maybe a big time gap between all that. And I read that you did an apprenticeship. I'm not sure if it was in Chicago or maybe it was already in California. But take me through maybe some of the steps.
Yeah, so there was definitely something about tattooing feels so overwhelming. To consider doing that feels like there's just miles and miles and miles between, finding tattooing and getting tattooed and actually considering doing it as a profession. So I moved to Chicago just as I got out of high school and kept working in skate shops. I was going to film school. It just felt like the next transition thing. I'd been filming for skate videos and stuff for so long, and I always had a camera in my hand. It felt like an easy decision to try something like that, So when I got to Chicago, I just kept getting tattooed. I would just save up money and go to the tattoo shop and hang out. I just loved being in there, and I was in there one time, and I think it was their shop manager person or something had either quit on the spot or said that they were going to need to leave or put in their 2 weeks or something. Either way, I was in there getting tattooed, and the shop was having this discussion of finding a new shop manager person. Okay. Thinking, I didn't really have anything going on. The skate shop wasn't really I'd been working in skate shops for so long, it just sort of felt a little redundant. I said, I'll help out, And they sort of made me promise that I wasn't interested in learning how to tattoo, because a lot of people will take that position in hopes that it will lead to an apprenticeship later down the road.
Of course,
and I said, no, and I really didn't at that point. I don't think I had any interest in learning, again, because it just felt so daunting. But once I got in there and got comfortable, I mean, it's a really hard thing to be around and not want to do. I think skateboarding is that same way, where if you are hanging around a skate shop or around a lot of skateboarders, inevitably you're going to feel some sort of, tractor beam pulling you in, so to speak, where there's something so infectious about skating and tattooing and these sort of counterculture things, music, whatever it is, that it sucks you in. You want to be a part of it,
Yeah, no, for sure. And so before you started tattooing yourself, did you draw at all? Were you like into arts, or were you like interested in making art, or were you more interested in the culture of tattoos and not necessarily in the more artistic side of it?
I think I always was into drawing a bit, but never, I used to get feedback from teachers and my parents and things like, oh, you're a great artist, but I never really thought that, anything would come of it. But I do remember being a kid and like just drawing in class, I couldn't pay attention and I was just daydreaming about skating, and I would pull out these like Ed Templeton ads and try to like redraw like toy machine graphics and stuff, and being super drawn to, skateboard imagery and trying to draw that. I can remember drawing tattoos on myself. But I mean, I guess I probably didn't consider it, only because it didn't feel like it was like an avenue that anyone ever presented me with. No teacher that I ever had would tell me that was a good career choice. No one was ever like, yeah, you should pursue artwork or skateboarding or whatever. I mean, it just never crossed my mind, So I think even though I had a little bit of a background in drawing, I've taken art courses and things, I think you have to really like relearn to draw when you start tattooing, because it's just such a different type of drawing. You're doing more tracing, more meticulous, like, straight lines and perfect circles. And so I think you sort of forget that, when you see people drawing, let's say, in TV shows or movies or something, they're typically sitting, across from someone in a coffee shop, and they're just sketching someone's portrait, as they're sitting across from them on a train or at a cafe or whatever. But you just don't draw like that for tattoos. You really have to like be committed to each and every line. It's a different approach, So I think I had to sort of forget what I knew and sort of figure out the fundamentals to get me to a place where I was drawing for tattooing,
Yeah. And so we'll talk about the book eventually, but I have a few questions about tattooing that I want to ask you before. But I just want to ask you about moving to San Francisco, and why did you decide to go there, basically, and what made you choose San Francisco and not LA or somewhere else? And how long have you been out there at this point?
Yeah, so I've been out here, I guess it's been in between 3 and 4 years now, but I had been coming to San Francisco a lot and, doing what we call a guest spot. So I would just come for a week and tattoo with my friends and visit. And I think both skateboarding and tattooing have such a rich history in San Francisco. San Francisco was already on my radar from years of watching skate videos and, ads and magazines and everything else. Like, that was sort of where, those were the proving grounds of skateboarding, like, if you thought you were a good skateboarder and you could make it in San Francisco, then you were probably going to do all right. And I think the same can be said about tattooing. There's been such a rich history of tattooing in this city, and for both of those things, like, it was the perfect place for me to end up. So it was always on my radar that I wanted to get here at some point. But, looking down the barrel of paying the cost to live here was always a little bit, daunting. It's very expensive. But once you're here, I think people just have a way of figuring it out. It just sort of works. But I think for me, that was a huge part of it. Just waiting until I was in a financial position to be able to like justify coming out here and not having to, live that life of 10 skateboarders in a house, sleeping on the floor and couches or something, like I was like kind of past that point in my life. So I finally felt like I was in a good place to come here. And of course I didn't want to come out here and blow it. I wanted to make sure that I was like on top of my game and that I was ready, because I knew coming here meant something a lot different, than anywhere else I'd ever been. So, but I love it here. It's just such a fun, I mean, I've been here for, like I said, in between 3 and 4 years, and I still, go down to Embarcadero and skate and go to Pier 7 and Fort Miley and, I go shop at Target, for like groceries, and it's right next to Wallenberg. So I'll go there and just like stand at the top of the stairs and, picture the crazy stuff that's happening there. And as a skate nerd, it's like amazing city to live in for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I guess in Europe, the equivalent would be Barcelona, maybe, or.
Yeah, totally.
And so, I just have a few kind of nerdy questions about tattooing before we get into the book.
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know much about tattooing myself. I love tattoos. I've got a bunch, but I don't really know much about like the act of tattooing. And I've done most of my tattoos with a friend of mine who's she's an artist in Brittany, actually, where I just told you before that I was living for the last 2 or 3 years. So I've done like maybe 20 tattoos with her at this point or something. And so I was just interested in asking you about like a tattoo session, basically, because I don't have hair anymore. You can't tell because I'm wearing a beanie, but my hair is long gone at this point. But I feel like going to do a tattoo is kind of between getting a haircut and going to therapy, sort of.
Sure.
The haircut because of like the physical touch and the smells and everything, and the therapy more for the discussion. And like I know I've done tattoos with this friend mostly, so we get into long talks about whatever, so I feel like we've developed a bond, and I'm sure I'll do other tattoos with other people, but I really enjoy doing tattoos with her because I like her style of tattooing, of course, but I also just enjoy spending time with her. We have a great conversations, and I was just curious to ask you about like how important do you feel like is this process of a tattoo session?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. It's there's a certain ritual to it, that becomes part of your process. And I think that having a process as an artist is one of the most important things. And I think that's what ends up keeping your work looking similar, and not only looking similar, but feeling front to back similar on my end, And so I think those rituals of the people coming in and picking the design, or, the conversations that we have leading up to me designing a tattoo for them, or whatever the case may be, I think it's equally important on my end as well as it is theirs, And I think when I have customers that try to, like overextend something, like if they aren't hearing me or we're just not clicking, it can derail the whole thing. And I think that there's like... that trust that you have, like, for example, you say you get tattooed by this person all the time, and, I think at some point it becomes so easy because, she knows what you want, you know what she's going to do, and it becomes, you take all that, like, guessing out of it,
Yeah.
I think when you meet someone for the first time, whether they're a therapist or a barber or a tattooer or whatever, you have to build that relationship, and it takes time, and I think it's asking for both people to be a certain amount of vulnerable, and that doesn't always come easy to people. And, of course, there are I do tattoos every day, right? So there are days where people come in and it's very transactional, and they tell me what they want, and they don't want me to have any sort of opinion about it. I'm just the vessel to get them in the door, get them tattooed, and get them out the door, and they pay me and they leave. And that's fine, that's like, at the end of the day, like, I'm not complaining. But then there are the people that you do develop these close relationships with, and I've tattooed people for years, and I've tattooed their daughters and their sons and their wives and their husbands and everything, and it's just, it becomes, there's a point where sometimes it almost feels funny asking them for money afterward, because I've developed such a genuine friendship and connection with these people. But at the end of the day, it's my job, which I think I feel so fortunate that I do have a job where I'm able to have such an impact on people in their lives, and not only physically with getting the tattoo, but emotionally sometimes. I've had some pretty heavy experiences giving tattoos, so
I'm sure. And it's interesting what you just mentioned about vulnerability. I think that's very true in the case of tattoos, because you're, well, depending on where you're getting the tattoo, but you're putting yourself in like getting tattooed somewhere that is maybe sometimes intimate, like, I don't know if it's on your rib cage or on, I don't know, your back, whatever, and also it hurts. So it's not like going to get a haircut where you're not feeling a thing. So, it's not like you're suffering during the process, whereas tattooing is very different in that regard.
I mean, it's much like skateboarding, and I've talked about it in the book, and other people have talked about it as well. It's just like, you have to earn a tattoo, just like someone has to earn a trick, how many times you've gone back and you've battled a trick for so long, and, broken bones, blown out knees, whatever, concussion, anything. I mean, like, just, you have to earn it, it's not a thing that comes easily. And I think in that way it requires and sort of demands a certain type of person and a certain level of dedication and commitment to be able to, to finish like a bodysuit, you know, or something.
Yeah.
You're covering yourself in tattoos. I mean, that's not easy, you know? And
Yeah.
I think that skateboarding and tattooing are very similar in that way, specifically, even just the amount of pain and stuff that we deal with as skateboarders and people that love tattoos. It's very similar in that way.
Yeah, for sure. I've wondered about this myself, doing these tattoos for the last, I think the first tattoo I got was only 5 years ago. And part of the thing that I enjoy actually is, it's not that I enjoy the pain, but I feel like if I didn't feel any pain, like, for example, if the tattoo process was you go in there for 10 minutes, you have a great tattoo, it doesn't hurt one bit, you go out and it's done, I don't feel like I would enjoy it as much. I feel like going through that pain and kind of deserving that tattoo in the end and having it on your body for the rest of your life, I feel like that's a huge part of what I enjoy about it.
I mean, just, you nailed it. I mean, just if it came easy, you know, like if skateboarding was like, you know, playing the Tony Hawk video games and it was that easy, like, you know, and you made tricks more often than you fell or something, you know, it's that same thing where that's not what we want, you know, we want that like serotonin or dopamine explosion that happens when we've accomplished something. And I think getting a tattoo is rewarding in that same way, where you are done and you're finished and you've walked to your car and you're just like, man, that was tough, but like, look how cool this thing looks.
Yeah,
you know? I mean,
exactly.
That's few things I think offer that, you know, and I've, you know, for me personally, it's just been skateboarding and tattooing that have ever sort of given me that same feeling, you know, and so they're so similar in that way.
And so this is a question, it's kind of random, but I was just curious to ask you about, for example, my friend that I do tattoos with, she has flashes, you know, she'll do some drawings and offer them for customers to come in and select one and have it tattooed. Like it's ready, she can just print it and have it tattooed on the person and then boom, it's done. But like, for example, every tattoo that I've done with her, I've never selected flashes that she's done. I've always like thought of something and I told her, oh, I'd like to do like this, whatever, like this drawing, whatever, you could turn it upside down and do this. And so she creates something out of nothing, you know, or from an image that I've seen in a movie or something. And I was curious to know how you feel about this and generally speaking in the tattoo community or for tattoo artists in general. Do you prefer like for people to come in and say, oh, hey, Ben, I'll just do this flash from your catalog? Or is it okay with you if someone comes in and says, oh, I want to do like a whatever, this thing that's not at all your style or just something that's completely different from what you do?
I mean, I think at this point, you know, just being able to tattoo is great. I don't want to be too picky, but I think I've sort of got the best of both worlds right now. I have a lot of people that are just picking Flash, and I try to, you know, have new Flash for people to look at pretty regularly. I think if, as a tattooer, if you're only going to offer people Flash, I think the least you can do is sort of put new designs in occasionally, right? So that people aren't just picking the same thing.
Yeah.
But I do have limitations. I think that's a big thing for people to understand about tattooers. You know, I can draw, but that's not to say that I can draw in every style, and that's not to say that I'm a good fit for, you know, every single idea. And I have spent, you know, I'm coming up on 15 years, and I've spent a lot of time tattooing things and regretting saying yes because I've been, you know, maybe I just needed the money, or you know, I thought it was going to go smoother than it did, or something. But you know, I think at this point I know my limitations, and so, you know, if someone comes in and they ask for, you know, sort of a specific design, that I almost feel bad saying that I'll do it if I know that someone, say, works in the tattoo shop in the booth next to me, you know, could do a better job than I could, then, you know, it's like, I'll just pass it off to them, you know. I mean, thankfully the shop is busy and I'm not turning people away in that way where I'm not ever doing tattoos, but I just want to give people good tattoos, and I think at this point in my career, like, I do a certain thing well, and that's just kind of what I want to do, you know, and I spent 10 plus years doing almost everything that came in, and thankfully I feel like I'm fairly versatile, but at the end of the day, you know, if I'm not going to do a good job, I don't need your money that bad, you know. I don't want to give you a bad tattoo, you know. I'll send you to someone that I know will take good care of you, you know. So there's a middle ground between both of those things, and there are tattooers that prefer it one way and tattooers that prefer another, and for me personally, you know, that's just sort of my approach.
Yeah. You just said the word versatile. That was another question I had, like the importance of versatility in tattooing versus skateboarding. Because in skating, as you know, there's a lot of skaters that focus on one type of skating. Like they'll do some crazy manuals or some crazy tech tricks, or other ones are like the zero guys will do big gaps and handrails. But some people are a bit more versatile, like let's say John Cardiel or I don't know, Grant Taylor or something. People like them who can pretty much skate everything comfortably, you know. I know that that's something that I enjoy very much in skating, someone that has the capacity of skating many different things. And do you feel that's something important in tattooing, or is it cooler, so to speak, to just focus on one specific style of tattooing? Or
Yeah, I think, everyone wants to have a seat at every table. So I think if you are out with your friends in the van and you're going skating and you pull up to a spot that, you're not comfortable skating, like at least maybe, you can sort of enjoy yourself in a way. Like I think with tattooing, it's important to be able to at least know your fundamentals,
Yeah.
So to be able to do a nice tattoo, whatever that means to you, I think is important, and that's, at the end of the day, like that, people's opinions of what look good and doesn't look good are pretty skewed. I mean, there are people that are doing not to pull any punch, not to, I don't know, whatever, but there are people doing pretty terrible tattoos and making a living, and so I don't know where that leaves us. I think people sometimes don't know what they want or what looks good and what doesn't, and I think as a tattooer, it's sort of part of my job, a big part of my job, to be able to at least give them something that's going to hold up and is going to look good and give them a good experience. And I don't know, some of these tattooers must just be the nicest people in the world, because some of these tattoos that I see are just so off the rails, and I guess at the end of the day, what is really cool to one group of people could be terrible to another group of people, and vice versa. I'm sure that these things exist in skateboarding too. People think certain styles of skating are corny or whatever, but I think as long as you can give someone a strong tattoo that's going to hold up over time, then I think that's all you can do, I suppose. But it's all over the place these days, much like skating. So
of course, for sure. And I read through the book, I don't remember which guest said that, but about the mental space, so to speak, that skateboarding can have, when I was a teenager skating and really obsessed with it, skateboarding was on my mind nonstop, whenever, even just walking down the street, of course, seeing spots everywhere, seeing potential for tricks everywhere, and just dreaming about skate videos or whatever, just always on my mind. And I'm sure tattooing must be kind of similar in that sense. But for example, for you who have been skating and tattooing for a long time, how much mental space does it occupy in your mind, so to speak?
I'd like to say that I can turn it off, but I don't know that we ever fully can. I think that we have sort of set up camp in these worlds that we live in, whether it's skateboarding or tattooing, and when there are two, it's even harder, right? I'm always seeing, even just seeing people's tattoos. I'm in line at the grocery store to check out, and someone in front of me has a nice tattoo, and I want to ask who did it, or, I think just those day-to-day reminders, and of course, with skating, as you know, it's pretty hard to not be, driving down the street and see a rail or something and picture a trick or turn around and look at it, or, it's just, it's a thing that I think it's a blessing and a curse sometimes, there are certainly times where I think I feel a little obsessive, and, I'm constantly on eBay looking for old boards or whatever. Just, it's not only something that I love doing, but it's also a huge chunk of my personality, it's just who I am. And I think as skateboarders, that's just, whether people continue to skate or not, at some point it's just been everything to you, and it's made you who you are now as an adult. Without skating, I don't know that we would have had the same music tastes or, style, fashion wise, or whatever it looks like. I think these things really end up determining the person that we come out the other end living,
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is a bit random as well, but I saw that in the book, and I didn't know about that, so I just wanted to ask you about it. Someone said that he used expired needles to tattoo, And I think you replied to the guests like, "Oh, those are the best," or something like that. And I was just wondering, why is that? Like, I didn't know that at all. And what makes expired needles better somehow?
I think I was trying to come across as being funny, probably, but I think that was Andrew Allen, who was just sort of probably taking a dig at the fact that he never really had like great equipment, you know. So
okay.
I think the needle expiration date thing is funny. I think every tattooer, like, I don't know the science behind when a needle expires or anything. I just know that as tattooers, we always go through our drawers and say, holy crap, these needles expired, 10 years ago or something, and we're still using them and they're fine or something. So I don't know that there's any legitimacy to needles being better when they're expired. I just think it was probably a joke, but yeah. I don't want to start spreading misinformation.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
But why do they have an expiration date at all? Like, what?
I mean, I think they're sterilized and sealed, and I think with any sterilization process, I'm sure that they have to legitimately put an expiration date on there or something. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't begin to understand that world of who makes those rules.
Okay. This is kind of my last nerdy question before we get into the book, but I just read in the last interview of the book with Chad Koplinger. I'm not too sure how to say his last name.
Yeah, Chad Koplinger.
Right. So he said he talked about like his assistant who broke his hands or something skating and who couldn't tattoo for, I guess, a little bit of time. Is that something that you're concerned with as a professional tattoo artist today? Like, are you kind of afraid of falling on your hands or stuff like that? Because I'm sure, like, if you have a bad bell and if you sprain your, your wrist or something, maybe you won't be able to tattoo as well, or maybe it will hurt a lot. So yeah, are you very cautious with that, or?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I thankfully, knock on wood, I haven't had an injury like that. I mean, I tweak my wrists and fall on them fairly regularly, I suppose, but I'm not really skating like at a level where I'm like jumping down anything anymore. I'm sort of like, I like to skate curbs and little manual pads and skate the park and sort of cruise around, but I've definitely had to like change up how I was skating, I suppose, but having said that, it'll always be like that flat ground kickflip that you'll primo and fall on your hands somehow, and that's like those end up being the falls where I'm probably most vulnerable or something when I'm just messing around. So I guess you're never fully safe, but I think as skateboarders you always know how to fall in a way that's like maybe a little more safe, but I've definitely had some scares, like I have to have another knee surgery next year, which I'm trying to sort of plan that around taking some time off of work or something if it works out, but a couple things here and there. I'm a little bit dinged up. I mean, it's just, we get older. Like you said, you're 35, I'm 34. I mean, skating just is pretty unforgiving, in so many ways. Like, I usually go to the park or go skate until I have that big fall, and that's just when I'm done, at this point. But yeah, I mean, I try to pay attention to it for sure. I definitely don't want to be out of work,
Yeah. So let's get into the book. So I read maybe in an interview you did that you started working on this during COVID time, right? But I'm sure it was on your mind before that. But tell me about like how this whole idea started and how and when maybe did you start working on it?
Yeah, definitely during the pandemic is when it sort of like got its legs and we started figuring it out a little bit more. But I've always just been so fascinated by this specific intersection of skating and tattooing, and I've always wanted to find a way to talk about that. And I thought about a podcast. I thought about some sort of art show or something where skateboarders could contribute artwork. I don't know. I was all over the place with it, and I did a little like photo zine thing during the early part of the pandemic where I just did a bunch of paintings. I couldn't tattoo, and San Francisco was shut down for like 9 months. Tattoo shops were pretty closed, so I just painted in lieu of being able to tattoo. So I had this huge body of work that I just put in a book and sort of put that out, and I really had a good time putting that together. And I think doing that sort of led me to the idea of, all right, well, maybe if I can get the right people on board, I'll have a project that's worth pursuing. So I didn't really know where to take it, and Eric Dressen was like really at the top of my list of someone that I felt like embodied both skateboarding and tattooing in such a powerful way. And I thought, okay, you know what? I think someone actually gave me his number, and that knew him, and they were like, yeah, just hit him up and figure it out. I didn't want to call him or anything. I'd never met him, and I was, such a fan of his growing up, and what a huge personality to cold call. So I sent him an email. I found his email address and sent him an email and just sort of gave him like the ramifications of what I was thinking of doing, and he emailed me back really quickly and was really pumped on the idea. So I think that gave me this boost of confidence moving forward. Then I could tell people, I'm working with Eric Dressen on this project. Would you be interested in contributing? And next thing you know, I had, everyone was saying yes. So it was pretty important to me that I kept the book feeling pretty like tattoo, skateboard, 50-50, sort of like, I wanted there to be good representation of each thing, right? And so I had, the idea. And then, of course, you run into the issue of like, how many pages, how long is this book going to be, how am I going to do it? So those things I just started to figure out after I was getting yeses from the people involved.
So when you got in touch with Eric Dressen, had you already decided that it was going to be a book, or were you not too sure what format it was going to be?
I knew that I wanted it to be a book. I didn't really know. I was still open to doing interviews through FaceTime or Zoom or something. I just didn't think, I didn't know that anyone was going to be interested at all. It wasn't as if this project existed already, so people were really taking a gamble on, what I was going to do. So I wasn't sure. I knew it was going to be a book, but outside of that, I guess I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. But the further along I got into talking to these people, and I thought the least I can do is come to you, right? Like, I'm in San Francisco, he's down in LA. I'll just go down there and we'll just sit down if he's open to that. And that became, I wanted this thing to feel like, I was driving this car, right? Like, this is a project more than just a FaceTime interview or something. I wanted to make this thing very intimate. So I thought the least I could do would be to sit down with these people in person and sort of come to them and give them my time. Subsequently get photos of us sitting together. And I hope that came across in the book, that was
for sure.
Very hands-on,
Yeah, the photos are amazing. Yeah. I wrote down the names of the guys who helped you, but you can probably shout them out or something. I don't remember their names here.
Yeah, so they're Brandon Burdine and Andy Eklov are the two principal photographers for the book. And they're both great friends and great photographers. And I think photos are such a huge part of a good photo of a tattoo or a good photo of someone, skating Hollywood High mean the same thing. That's like your proof. That's your proof of the thing. So like photos have always been a huge part of both skating and tattooing. So I knew that I wanted the photo contributions to be good, so that was an easy decision.
And so how did you select the people that you wanted to interview? You just mentioned that once you had Eric on board, it was probably easier to convince other guests to get on board. But did you make a list of people that you'd like to interview and then kind of reached out to a few? Like how did you select all the people?
Yeah, I mean, I look like some sort of like Law and Order SVU detective. I have this white board in my room, dry erase board of all these names and where they're at and people. But yeah, I mean, I had a list, and I thought let's just go down the list and sort of reach out to these people, and I guess I wanted to keep volume 1 fairly specific, and I wanted it to have this very concrete theme, and I wanted to make sure everyone was on brand and everything. So the list was pretty chiseled out, in the beginning, and Eric and Jamie and Chad and these people that I knew that I really wanted to talk to. I had those names in mind for sure. Andrew Allen and Nathan Costeco, that sort of came across. I had this idea of maybe doing a 3-way style interview with 2 people. Cheyenne Sawyer is a dear friend of mine, and I've known him through tattooing for quite a while, and I knew that Tyler Bledsoe had started sort of learning to tattoo from him and started tattooing and working for Cheyenne, and I had met Nathan a couple of times, and I knew him and Andrew were really close, and I didn't know Andrew, but I was okay, I have these 2 interviews that I could do with a couple of people that sort of, I love the juxtaposition of an old senior tattooer and a young tattooer, and flip the script with skating, and Cheyenne found tattooing through skating, and skateboarding sort of led Tyler to tattooing, and so it was really this yin and yang thing that worked out really well. And sort of a similar thing with Nate and Andrew. So, I thought that was a different approach, and I liked the idea of being able to have conversations with two people throughout the book like that, and I those are some of my favorite ones, so...
Yeah, those were really... I mean, all of them were sick, but these ones especially, yeah, for sure. So, did you decide that you wanted to do a series straight away, or were you thinking like maybe I'll just do one book? Or because of course this is kind of infinite, so to speak. I mean, maybe not infinite, but I'm sure you could do 20 editions, 20 volumes of this book, because there's just so many people that are in both worlds. So yeah, did you start with in mind like, okay, I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4 volumes, or do you have any idea at what point you'll stop, or like how do you see this developing?
I didn't want to get greedy or anything, I didn't want to... And this first book, like, it being such a success, I guess, if I can say that, I feel like the book is out and we've gotten a lot of, like, positive feedback, and it's been going really well. I think in the beginning, like, tattooers and skateboarders or creatives in general, like, we're our biggest critics, so I think I definitely didn't know if I even had anything that was going to work, This could have been a total flop and nobody could have cared. I mean, so in the beginning I definitely thought to just do a book, and then as I talked to these people, every single person was like, oh man, you got to talk to this person or that person, or like, let me give you this guy's number, or this person's number, or whatever. And it just sort of like snowballed into a bigger thing. Mm-hmm. And everyone that I talked to had not only like high praise for what I was doing, which kept me like motivated and feeling like I had something good on my hands. Like it was just constantly like more content, with people telling me to reach out to certain other people. And so I started just like developing a list, and I thought, well, okay, I have too many people for just one book. This is just too much, and so I'll just do more than one, and
mm-hmm.
and we've already got some people lined up for the second one, and we're sort of like getting that a little bit going. I want to give myself a little bit of a break through the holidays, because this was very like
time consuming, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was time consuming, and it was like kind of a lot, but I think now that I have more of a process going into the second one, I think it won't feel so overwhelming. That was a large chunk of it, was just learning, different specs on making books, and it was sort of a whole world that I didn't know anything about. So now that I feel like I've got my foot in the door, I think it'll be a little easier moving forward,
Yeah, for sure. And tell me about like the title of the book, Let It Kill You. So from what I understand, it's a reference to Bukowski. And I thought that was interesting because actually the name of my podcast, Beyond Boards, is not an immediate reference to Bukowski. But before I started this podcast, I did another one called Beyond Bars, which was dedicated to addiction because I was quitting alcohol when COVID started in April 2020. And I actually started a podcast about addiction and the process of getting sober. And I was trying to think of a name, and I found this Bukowski quote that said, in jail they have the wrong kind of bars. And I thought it was a cool name, and I was trying to use part of it or all of it, but it was a bit long for a podcast name. And then a friend of mine suggested that I just call it Beyond Bars, as in like going beyond the bars of a prison and the bars where you go drink. And so I just thought it was interesting that you decided to call it Let It Kill You. And tell me about like selecting this name, basically.
Yeah, first of all, that's amazing. Congratulations on that. That's a huge accomplishment. I didn't realize you had that other podcast. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Bukowski is like a pretty like fascinatingly interesting, miserable, however you want to look at it, person,
Yeah.
I've just loved that quote, and I think when I first started getting tattooed, believe it or not, I had thought about finding a place for that quote, on
mm-hmm.
me somewhere, and I never got it. But not to get too heavy, but I think that so many people don't ever find something that they're that passionate about, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's truly something that I can't really explain to someone who doesn't know what skateboarding does to skateboarders or why we kill ourselves in the way that we do, both, not always literally, but I mean, mm-hmm. It's just such a overwhelmingly impossible thing, right? There's no ceiling to it. There's never a cap of like, I've learned every trick, I'm done, I quit, like there's no limitations to what you can or can't do, much like with tattooing, and we just dedicate so much of ourselves to these things that it sort of can become tough to live in a world outside of it, and I think like, there are times when, my partner, she works sort of in tech, and there are times where we'll go to dinner with maybe some of her friends from work or something, and thankfully I'm pretty I can sort of blend in anywhere, and I'm good at talking to people just from what I do for work. But then there are times where I'll be like in a conversation and I'm just like lost in my own world of feeling so like I can't connect, and I'm sure that goes the other way, and that's reciprocated on their end if I'm talking about tattooing or skateboarding or something. I think that, find what you love and let it kill you. I think that quote just means so much, and it's so heavy. I think these things have done so much for me and given me a life that I am so thankful for, and I never would have found had it not been for either one of them. And to have like a true passion is something that I think a lot of people miss out on. So I'm just super thankful to have a seat at both of these tables,
Absolutely. And so how did you prepare for the interviews? Did you go to see each guest with did you prepare a lot, research them, prepare full lists of questions? Or did you have a bit more of a mellow approach, as in let's just go have a nice chat with these people and try to learn about them on the spot, I'm going to compare this in the podcasting world. For example, I try to research my guests a bit. So I prepare my interviews in advance. Whereas, for example, the Nine Club, as you know, they have a bit more of a mellow approach where they're really just having a fun conversation between skaters, Yeah. I'm sure they research a bit their guests as well, but I feel like it's a bit more improvised and not as scripted as how I do it, for example. So how did you prepare for this? And did you have any previous experience doing interviews like that?
No, I never had any experience interviewing anyone, I suppose, but I also didn't realize that there is sort of like an art to being able to do a good interview, and I think a good interview ends in a heavy conversation, right? I think at some point I was very specific, and I wanted to have a list of questions in case I needed them, but I found after the first couple, I always try to start the interviews casually and then sort of jump into other things, but I found that just having a conversation and sort of letting the questions that I had with me be like a safety net, if I needed them, but just to be able to have a conversation with someone organically and not need that, not be relying on those questions, I think is more fun to listen to. And sometimes I think I've done interviews where people will send me the questions and I'll answer them, I'll send them back, from magazines or whatever. I like that, and I think that can work, but there are times when I'll be reading something and I will wish that I could have them embellish or ask them more about their answer, and I think that if you're left with a cliffhanger or something, it's just kind of drives you crazy. So I found that I had the questions if I needed them, but I also didn't need them often. Okay. And I think the most important thing for me was, how many interviews has Jamie Thomas done, and I just didn't want the interview to be, so where did you grow up? And, I asked him those questions because I think they make a good introductory thing to an interview, but I didn't want to ask him about the leap of faith or the stuff he's been asked a million times. So I felt like just having a one-off conversation between he and I was going to end in a different result from maybe all the previous interviews that he has done. So.
No, absolutely. It's a fine line between an interview and a conversation. I mean, just like we're doing right now, it's a bit of both, I guess. But I like to have a kind of a somewhat rigid format for my interview process, because when I first started doing this podcast, I tended to not prepare as much my questions, and afterwards I would regret it and just realize, oh shit, I forgot to ask about this, and I would be really frustrated because it's not like, oh, I'm gonna send the guest the question and have him record it, but so I tend to rely on my questions a lot, and I guess for me it's good because I get to ask all I want to ask to the guest, but it's also a bit more rigid in the shape of the conversation that it takes, So
yeah, and I think your interviews are great, and I think you're driving the car and I'm sort of just riding with you. So I think for you to have a process and have questions on deck is great, and I think that's, like you said, I mean, there's nothing worse than finishing an interview and being like, oh, I totally forgot that one whole cluster of, whatever I wanted to know about, so.
Yeah, exactly. And so you talked about the second volume. As you said, you're going to take a break, I'm sure, and have a bit of a break after releasing the book and finishing it. And you just did a bunch of premieres or release parties in New York and San Francisco. I think you're doing one in Portland, maybe this weekend or very soon. And tell me about, before we get into volume 2, tell me about the feedback you've gotten from people so far.
Yeah, so the first party we did was down in Los Angeles at Marriage Skate Shop.
Right.
And that was probably the most stressful one, just because it was I think, again, it's I was worried maybe no one would show up or it wasn't going to be a success or something. I had a lot riding on it in the way of, just wanting people to be there to experience that with me. And man, it was crazy. There were so many people there, and just people that I've really looked up to, and got to meet a lot of skateboarders that I'd never met. And I was just pretty blown away and overwhelmed by the support and everything. I think getting that one out of the way and having that one completed, I think gave me a sense of relief in that way. I went back to Indianapolis to sort of my hometown skate shop, Minus, and Nick Hullab, who owns that shop, is a dear friend of mine. I've known him for years, and so that felt a little less pressure, just because I knew, I had lived in Indianapolis my whole life, and, I knew so many people there that it was a different thing, right? I wasn't so worried about people showing up. I felt like I was pretty sure it would be successful, and it was great. And then we continued on to New York City, and we did one with James at Labor, and that was huge for me. I mean, that's been one of my favorite skate shops forever, and to be able to host it there was really humbling, and it was great. It was a success, and it went really well. And then kind of came home and worked for this week, and then we go up to Portland to Cal's Pharmacy, and we're going to sort of do another party with Tyler Bledsoe is going to be there tattooing and showing artwork, and sort of this perfect hybrid party thing between the book and his career so far. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And then we haven't done one in San Francisco yet. I may do some sort of pop-up thing here around the holidays, and maybe do something. I haven't fully decided on that yet, but just the thought of planning more stuff feels really overwhelming. So
yeah. And so what about volume 2? When will you start? Have you started working on it already, or is it something you're going to start working on maybe early next year, or what are the next steps for this next volume?
So I've started in the sense that I've started a list of people that I am ready to talk to, and sort of figure out a way to maybe do, if a couple people are in LA, maybe I try to line the interviews up to do them both while I'm down there at the same time, and make a more of a routine out of this moving forward. But so I've sort of started to map it out in my head, but I haven't really taken any steps as far as really sitting down with anyone or anything. I think I want to give myself, like I said, through the beginning of the year to sort of relax and enjoy the holidays with my family and prepare for the next one. And so I haven't started it in any tangible way, I suppose. It's more in my head right now, but I'm ready.
Yeah, cool. And I'm sure you can't really tell me who's going to be in it or who you've planned to interview, but I was wondering if maybe aside from the people that you will eventually interview for this second volume, who are some people maybe in the skateboarding and tattooing worlds that you would love to interview? Who are some of your dream guests?
Man, there are so many people. I think that at some point it would be interesting to sort of open this up to more than just tattooing, and sort of, skateboarders and their passions, and sort of different creative outlets, whether it's writing or photography or, film or tattooing or something. I think we have a sort of this sandbox of a platform. But I mean, there are tons of people that I don't know have a ton to do with tattooing specifically, but I mean, if I could sit down with, Ed Templeton or Martin Gonzalez or Greg Hunt or Jason Lee, or I know one of my favorite interviews you've done was with Scott Bourne, and I thought, Scott's such an interesting person, and, I think he's such a legend in skateboarding, and his writing is incredible. And so there are people like that I would love to talk to, and Scott's pretty heavily tattooed, and he was sort of getting very unique tattoos for that time. You know, he was sort of thinking outside of the box of maybe what were on the walls of tattoo shops, and he just seems like a really interesting guy, and I've been a huge fan of his for a long time. So there's a list of tons of people. I just want to make sure that each book has a theme and doesn't go off the rails too far, and we sort of keep it very, like, you know, I only want to put things out if I feel like I have good content, you know, like I'm sure you feel the same way about this podcast, you know, and making sure that you're not just putting things out for the sake of putting them out, and you have something to offer. So we'll see.
Exciting. Yeah, I look forward to the following ones for sure. So we're going to wrap this up pretty soon, but I just wanted to ask something that I didn't ask you before. It was kind of the impact of Instagram on skateboarding versus tattooing. I can only really talk about skateboarding, but Instagram has definitely had a huge influence on how skateboarding is perceived, and I think you touched on this in the book with Andrew Allen, actually, who said it's not necessarily just Instagram, but like there's just so much content out there, and like he, from what I remember, he said he didn't watch too many skate videos because it would kind of bum him out, you know, like to see the level of the kids nowadays and stuff. So it would he would lose his motivation to go skate if he watched too much of what's coming out and everything. And I was just wondering how you feel about that with tattooing. Do you feel like maybe having so many tattoo artists that share their photos and everything, did it kind of affect profoundly how people approach tattoos and how tattoo artists present their work?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a huge topic of conversation, obviously, nowadays, and rightfully so. I mean, it's changed the game for sure. I mean, it's like, I think more than anything, you know, of course it waters it down a little bit, but it's sort of, I don't know, sometimes I think it can give people like a false sense of, you know, accomplishment or something even. Like there seems to be less like genuine constructive criticism in tattooing now, and it's like, you know, no one's going on people's Instagram pages and seeing a tattoo that they've done and saying like, this doesn't look right, that doesn't look right, this is wrong, you know, what are you doing? Like, it's just created this like built-in fan club for every tattooer to think that they have it figured out front to back, and I think that can be pretty damaging to young people, and, you know, it gives people, like I said, this sort of false sense of, you know, I've got it figured out, what do I need you for, you know, and it used to be, you know, in a similar way, skateboarding is the same way, where, you know, so much of tattooing has been passed down, you know, orally from person to person, from, you know, mentor to apprentice, and it was very tight-knit. There wasn't a lot of information sharing for a long time. You know, to get information, you know, you were sort of required to go and be tattooed by these people who knew that thing, and that was how you were going to get it. Or maybe you were fortunate enough to know someone who knew someone or whatever. So I think more than anything, you know, it's created this, like, I don't know, like this young generation of tattooing that is sort of like, they've never really had to pay their dues, sort of, I guess is probably the easiest way to do it. You can sort of get in and start doing the one style or one thing and do that to death, you know, and your people are going to support you for that, and you're just going to continue offering that, and people are going to line up and ask for it, and you're just going to have this immediate response that you're not having to work for really in any way. You're just getting constant good positive feedback, and I don't know, I think that creates like a pretty weird environment long term for tattooing as a whole, you know. But you know, again, I think it's great that tattooing is become so inclusive in some ways, but in other ways it can be pretty tough for the people who have been here for longer, I think, you know.
Yeah. So I have a few friends questions for you that I'll share with you in a second. But I usually finish with the same question, which is what's like the most valuable lesson that you feel you've learned from skateboarding? And in your case, I guess you could extend that to tattooing maybe. So yeah, does anything come to mind? I mean, it's hard to answer just one thing.
I think that's a big question, but I guess at face value, like the first thing that comes to mind is the importance of traveling, you know, like, and getting out of my hometown. I think I couldn't wait to leave, and, you know, not because I hated where I grew up or anything, but just because I felt like so much of the good skateboarding was happening in other places, you know, and I think that sort of, you know, growing up watching skate videos and traveling to skate or film or skate a new park or whatever, it gave me this sort of addiction to like constantly being moving and traveling around as much as I could. And I think, to me, I think the difference between someone who travels and someone who doesn't can make all the difference. You know, I think it really gives people a larger sense of empathy and
Yeah.
culture, and I think the world could use that, a lot right now. And I think a lot of, even what's going on politically, people are just so afraid of change, and they're so afraid of things not, being the same. And I think a lot of that can be, a lot of these people are maybe that fear is coming out of places where people have never left and they don't know, because they've never seen it. And I think I'm thankful to skateboarding and tattooing for instilling the importance of traveling in me. I guess that would probably be my answer.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. All right, well, let's do some of these friends' questions. So the first one is from Michael Sieben,
Oh, great.
who wrote the foreword, right, for the book.
Yeah.
So he said, what is a skate graphic you'd like to tattoo on somebody?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, I have never gotten to do that Santa Cruz screaming hand graphic, and I think that thing is so cool, and I think it embodies so much of what it takes to do a good tattoo. Visually, it's so loud. I think it looks super tough. I would love to do that. I haven't tattooed it. I just finally tattooed that, that Powell, skull ripper.
Oh,
thing. Finally, I'd been wanting to do that for years. And it's funny, the guy who got that is a friend of mine, and he had mentioned wanting to get that Santa Cruz screaming hand as well. He's an old skateboarder, and I said, please let me know, because I really want to do it. So hopefully I'll get to post that one up on the internet at some point. But that, I would have to say that's such a cool one. I mean, gosh, there's so many, old graphics, man, that's tough. But, so many of those graphics from the 80s just are already ready to go. They would make such cool tattoos, so, but yeah, I would say that one for sure.
Cool. Yeah, that's a really good one for sure. And he said, on the flip side, what is a skate graphic that you would really not want to tattoo on someone?
Man, geez, a skate graphic I wouldn't want to tattoo. I don't know, man. I mean, I guess, trying to think of something. Some graphics make for great tattoos. On the other hand, some graphics make for terrible tattoos. Sometimes people come in and they want logos, and they're very graphic designy, and they're very, perfectly symmetrical. So, let's say, the Element logo would probably be a nightmare to tattoo, because it would be, perfectly straight parallel lines and a perfect circle or something. So I guess any sort of graphic that might be created in that way, a very graphic design approach, might be kind of tough. I don't know. And then there's some of that old Dogtown stuff that's really crazy and busy. That would be tough to tattoo as well. But yeah, I think any sort of, like I said, graphic design looking logo, I'd probably pass on.
Okay. All right. This next one is from Eric Dressen.
Great.
First guest from the book. So he said, how did it feel to finally get your new book in your hands after all the hard work you put into it?
Oh, man. Another big question. It was overwhelming, it was very, it was such an ambiguous thing most of the time, because it was so just this idea. And until we had, a physical book, it still felt like it was, in our brains, sort of. We had, of course, PDFs and things mocked up, but to hold the book and to open it and flip it and feel the pages was huge. And I'll never forget, Eric showed up at the party in LA, and he walked in, and I obviously went up to him and said hey and gave him a hug and thanked him. And he was so what he had to say about holding the book and flipping through it meant so much to me. It was huge. I mean, the fact that I got to do a book with Eric Dressen is I mean, who am I? You know what I mean? It's so overwhelming still to think. But his feedback was huge, and he was really sort of, I think, impressed. And that's really what I wanted out of it, was for people to not like they were expecting some flimsy, terrible book or anything, but to be able to over-deliver in that way, was huge. And so I think that there's no way I wouldn't do a second one, because I'm just going to chase that high again. It was pretty fun to get to live it and feel it and see people, experience it. And I'm getting messages now as we speak. People are starting to receive their books in the mail. And I just got a message from someone the other day that they had decided that they were going to go get tattooed, and they hadn't been tattooed in years, and they were an old skateboarder. And the fact that that's even happening, based on something I did, was huge. And it was such a fun thing to read,
Yeah, that's really awesome. Okay, this next one. So you probably don't know this guy. His name is Yuri Korotun. He's a Ukrainian skater.
Awesome.
I just did an interview with him a few weeks ago. I'm going to release it a little bit before yours. But he's a really talented skater from near Kiev. And he relocated to Germany, and he's giving like skate classes to young refugees from Ukraine over there. So anyways, he's a very big tattoo fan himself. I don't know if he actually tattoos other people, but he's got a bunch of tattoos and he obviously loves them. And so I just asked him if he wanted to share a question with you. And so basically his question is, he said, how strongly does the tattoo environment, meaning people in the industry, affect your life? Who are more true friends, people from the skateboarding scene or people from the tattoo scene?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me personally, like, you know, I love skateboarding, but at the end of the day, tattooing is what I do for a job, you know, so I think that more of my social circles revolve around tattooing at this point in my life, but I think that I have a really healthy balance because thankfully, I tattoo so many skateboarders, you know, that's such a huge part of my clientele, which is awesome. I mean, I love tattooing to begin with, but if I can give someone a tattoo and talk about, you know, a recent video part that came out or, you know, something like that. That's like, at the end of the day, there's nothing more I could ask for to be able to talk about skateboarding and to be giving a tattoo. But yeah, I would say because I tattoo for a living, I probably, my social circle probably revolves around tattooing a bit more than skating at this point in my life. But, you know, I just spend more time in a tattoo shop than a skate shop, so...
Okay, let's see. This one is from... So this guy, he's an interesting guy from France. His name is Edouard Depaz. He's a tattoo artist and a skater. He skates for a European brand called Rave Skateboards. I think he's a bit younger than us, probably like in his late 20s or something. I'm actually going to get a tattoo with him very soon.
Amazing.
I like his style of tattooing. I've never done tattoos with him, but... And so I told him about interviewing you, and he didn't know about the book, and he said it was a rad project, so he wanted to share a question.
Amazing.
So he said, how much did skateboarding inspire you in tattooing? And then the following question is, why do you think that the bridge between skateboarding and tattooing is that strong? Other subcultures don't seem to be this tied up together.
All right. Oh, man. Those are good questions. I think that, I guess, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is, like, you don't go skating and try a trick once and then quit, right? Like, you have to battle for that, and you have to learn that, and you have to perfect it. And let's say, you know, I don't know, we'll just use a kickflip as an example. Like, you learn to kickflip when you're a kid, and you land a couple of kickflips, and it's like the highlight of your life. You know, whether, but that doesn't mean you're landing kickflips every time. So I think you become obsessed with perfecting that thing, and you know, being able to snap your fingers and do a kickflip. That's when you can kickflip, right? It's not that you've landed kickflips, but that you can do them on command or whatever.
Yeah.
You need them
consistently
to be able to perfect your skateboarding, and that is like a fundamental building block. You know, I don't think anyone learns how to frontside flip until they can kickflip.
Yeah.
You know, people don't learn how to switch flip until they can kick. I'm sure, you know, there could be some people out there. But I think that sort of mindset really is applicable in tattooing, you know? Like, just because I've done one nice tattoo doesn't mean that I'm the best tattooer ever, you know? I mean, people do nice tattoos on a fluke all the time, you know? There are people, you know, that have the perfect setting and the perfect setup and everything goes smoothly and the tattoo comes out looking great, but you're only as good as the last tattoo that you've done, right? So, like, you gotta be able to perform at that level constantly, and so I think, you know, becoming obsessed with perfecting things through skateboarding has sort of rolled over into tattooing in that same way. So you'll have to remind me of the second part of the question. It was about the bridge between skating and tattooing. Yeah, right?
Like, why do you think that this bridge is so strong? Because the other subcultures don't seem that tied up together.
Yeah, you know, I think just the casual worlds that we live in the sense we've talked about even throughout this interview, like the familiarities between a skate shop and a tattoo shop alone, you know, that feeling that I got when I went into a tattoo shop felt like I could have been in a skate shop. There was just tattoo designs on the wall instead of skateboards, you know, and I think that for whatever reason, you know, it's so similar in that way. I think when skateboarders meet other skateboarders, or when tattooers meet other tattooers or something, we sort of like shed having to get to know one another. We could just become friends, right? We don't necessarily have to know everything about one another. We just know that we both love skateboarding, and you know, how many times have you been skating a spot or at a park and there's one other person there, and by the, you know, it's kind of like in the beginning you're just like watching each other, but by the end of it and by the time you leave, you're like, what's your name? You know, you become friends. It's like, you don't need to know anything about these people to know that you'll probably get on together pretty well. You know?
Right,
So
yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's that unspoken weird bond between tattooing and skateboarding that I think is, you don't find that many other places, you know, so.
Yeah, the very strong communities for sure. Okay, let's see. This one is an audio one, and I don't think he says his name, so I'll just have you listen to it. I'll tell you who it is afterwards.
Okay.
So, question. So I don't really have anything like clever or witty or anything, but the first thing that came to mind is like, when was that moment? Like, I remember when I was a kid and I was like 4 years old, where my first memory of skateboarding, and I saw it on TV, and it clicked, and I don't know, I just thought it was the coolest thing, and then eventually I got into it and loved it. When did you go, yeah, tattooing is the coolest fucking thing ever, and I want to do that? Because it's kind of a random thing. It's not like, oh, I want to pick up a pencil and draw or something. It's like, yeah, I want to mark someone and cause someone pain for the rest, you know. So what was it that made your brain click to get into tattooing?
Yeah, that's another great question. Who was that one from?
That's Jason Adams.
Oh, great.
Yeah, you know, former pro. I don't know if he's still pro. I'm not sure if he's still pro. But he skated for Enjoy, Black
I'm not
Label.
entirely sure, but
I think he's.
Oh yeah, I mean,
he might still be on Black Label. I'm not too sure.
Well, that's huge. That's amazing that he submitted a question. That's really incredible. Well, I gotta make the answer good then, right? All right, so I have told this story before, but when I was a kid, my older cousin, her name is Andrea, and she moved away from Indiana and moved to Seattle and met a boy that was in a band. He was in a punk rock band. Mm-hmm. And that band is still a band. They're called MXPX. They've been around for years. And she met the singer, Mike, through just living in Seattle. And I remember one year she brought him home for the holidays. I think it must have been Christmas or Thanksgiving or something, or maybe just to visit. But I remember being in the back seat of my parents' car, and we were on our way to go see her. And they just kept warning me and telling me that this guy looked a little bit different, and but he's nice, and don't worry, you know, and it's sort of building him up to be this like larger than life person.
Yeah.
And I remember I walked in the house, and he was sitting there playing an acoustic guitar, and he just was covered in tattoos.
Okay.
And I immediately was like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing ever. This guy's covered in tattoos, musician, whatever. I just remember thinking, this guy's got to be the coolest dude ever. And so I think that was the moment when I was like, I want tattoos.
Okay.
And I was pretty young, you know, I was probably 10 or younger, but I don't think I really seriously considered feeling like I could do tattoos until I started working in a shop. You know, I think, if anything, when I started getting tattooed when I was older, it made me feel like it was less attainable, because I don't know if you've watched people tattoo you, but it seems like it's probably pretty tough to do, you know, so my confidence level was pretty low.
Yeah.
And I think even when I started my apprenticeship, I was still pretty like certain that I wasn't going to be able to pull it off at some point, you know, or maybe I wasn't going to be good. But but yeah, I think when I met him when I was young, I remember that moment and being like, that dude is cool. I don't have as many tattoos as that guy, and you know, so that was probably my first moment of thinking maybe I wanted to be interested in that later down the road, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have just a few last ones. This one is from Ryan Townley.
Yeah.
I don't know if you two know each other. I don't know. Maybe you tattooed him?
We do. I haven't tattooed him, but we just met in LA and hung out a couple of times. I met him with the welcome team, or most of the team, at the tattoo shop, and they came in and we met, and then we ended up visiting a little bit at the marriage release party. So
cool.
Awesome.
So he said, if you could only have one tattoo on you that you currently already have, which one would you choose and why?
Oh boy. Well,
it's a tough one.
Unfortunately, I think people have this misconception that tattooers are like covered in the best tattoos ever, and like, you know, they always think that like we are very picky about who we go to, but I have a lot of really bad tattoos, and I think in the beginning you're just more interested in like quantity over quality. You just want to cover yourself as fast as you can. So I mean, I guess it would just be fun to keep that initial Krail Tap skateboard, to be honest. You know, I think that tattoo started everything for me, and sort of solidified how much I loved skateboarding at that point, and still continue to love skateboarding, and it's been my most talked about tattoo through all of these interviews and stuff that I've done. So I guess I would keep the Crail Tap board. Now, it's right on my forearm, so, everyone could see it, and I think it means a lot to me, and, whatever. So that would be the board, the tattoo, I would keep the Crail Tap board.
Cool. Yeah, very good answer. Okay, 2 last ones. Let's do this. This one is an audio one again.
Okay.
Hey, Ben, this is Ross. I got a couple questions for you, man. I hear you talking about Indianapolis. I've never heard of it, man. Is that in Canada? That's my first question. Second question is, tell me the story of the craziest cover-up anyone ever asked you to do in Indianapolis. All right.
Did you hear it okay?
Oh, yeah. So, Ross is a dear friend of mine, and we work right next to each other at Idle Hands, and he is an incredible tattooer and a dear friend, and he loves to give me shit about being from Indiana. And anytime he ever hears me talk about being from Indianapolis, he pipes up, Indiana, where is that? And it's sort of become a running joke. So it's not in Canada, Ross. It's in the middle of nowhere. And I know what he wants to hear, and I know the second question. So, okay. I had a pretty crazy experience with a cover-up tattoo in Indianapolis, and I've told this story a couple of times, and I know what he's getting at. So, I had a guy come into the tattoo shop. This was maybe 10 years ago or something. I was a younger tattooer, but he comes in, and he sort of seems like lost or out of place, and I go up to him, and I ask him, what can I help you with? And he said, well, I have a tattoo, and I want to see if I can have it covered. Mm-hmm. And I say, okay, yeah, I'll have to see it, obviously, to know if I can cover it. What do you have? And he said, well, it's in kind of an embarrassing place. It's on my hip. And I just, is there a more private area that we can go to? And I just don't want to unbutton my pants in the lobby. And I said, all right, sure, yeah. And we had this, room in the back of the shop where it was, I think piercing was done out of there for a while and, whatever. But, so I take him in the back, and I, just as I turned around and shut the door behind me, I turned back around, and he has his member, if you will, in his hand, and he's shaking it at me. And I'm like, what are you doing? Of course, I don't know how to react. I'm just and then I see visual, I'm like, okay, there's no tattoo at all anywhere. And this dude is just some weird public flashing guy.
Okay.
And so I ended up having to be like, dude, what are you doing? Get out of the shop, man. I threw him out, and, of course I told everybody else in the shop what had happened. I was like, that was crazy, whatever. Don't let this dude come back. And then I started getting phone calls, either later in that, it may have even been later than that day, but it was at least throughout the week from other shops in the city that had said he had been coming in there and doing the same thing. And they wanted to warn us in case he came in. I said, he already came in here. And so I think he was just some weird, pervy flasher guy or something.
Okay.
So I never did the cover-up, but that was not really a tattoo to cover. So, that was pretty wild.
Oh, wow, yeah. That's a pretty crazy story.
Yeah, it was weird.
I hope this guy stopped flashing all over tattoo shops in Indiana.
I hope so too, man.
Okay, the last question is from the last guest from your book, Chad Koplinger. He said, when do you feel most alive?
Wow. Chad would have a cool question like that. When do I feel most alive? Well, to stay on brand and to be honest, it has to come when those worlds are truly colliding, skateboarding and tattooing. I remember tattooing recently, and I was tattooing another skateboarder, and I have this playlist of early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s skate songs.
Right.
And the entire tattoo, front to back, it would be every couple of minutes there would be a new song on, and we would just be talking about that person. Oh, that Mark Appleyard part, or whatever the song was, and we just spent, a couple hours just reminiscing about old skate videos and having such a blast. And, like I said earlier, when those worlds collide for me in that way, it means everything to me. And I think that, being able to tattoo every day and make a living doing this is still not lost on me how lucky I am. This year alone, I've been to Spain and Greece and, all over the place just for this one thing that I'm able to do. And that's, so when those moments happen, when I'm leaving the tattoo shop in Barcelona, after working and then going to Macba to skate or something, those moments, I can't compare them to anything else. I mean, that would be when I feel most alive. Chad talks about in the book, after he got his first tattoo, he left the tattoo shop and went skating and had the best session of his life.
Oh yeah,
He was landing tricks left and right, and you know, when those two worlds collide in that way, I mean, it's really special. And, yeah. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Cool. Yeah, great way to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Ben. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This was a blast. Yeah, I really love what you're doing, and I look forward to anytime you drop a new episode. So, I'm really thankful to be here, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And good luck with the next editions or the next volumes. I look forward to many more volumes of Let It Kill You, because it's such a cool project. So, yeah, keep it going.
Thank you so much. I'll definitely keep you in the loop, man. I appreciate it.
That's it for my conversation with Ben McQueen. If you'd like to purchase the first volume of Let It Kill You, go visit resolute-press.com. Follow Ben on Instagram at Ben McQueen Tattoo to check out some of his work. If you're in the San Francisco area, you can even book a tattoo with him. Follow also at Let It Kill You Book to keep an eye on the future volumes of this amazing book project. Thank you for tuning in. See you soon for a new episode of Beyond Boards.